Story 1. It was an ordinary Tuesday when I first stepped into the old house. The kind of house that felt like it had 1,000 stories to tell, but only if you were willing to listen. It stood at the edge of town, surrounded by trees that seemed tall, their branches clawing at the sky. The house, though worn down and aging, had an undeniable charm. The wood was creaky, the paint chipped, but there was something about it that called to me. I had just moved in, eager to start fresh, away from the hustle of city life. I was alone. My family had left a few years ago, and I had yet to make many friends in this new town. Moving into this house was a decision driven by necessity, but I soon realized it was much more than just a place to live. It was a place filled with strange and unsettling energy. I spent the first few days exploring the house, unpacking boxes, and getting used to the creaks and groans of the old structure. The house had 2 floors, a large attic, and a surprisingly spacious basement. But it was the upstairs washroom that caught my attention. It was a small room with pale blue tiles, a simple sink, and a clawfoot tub that looked as if it had been there for decades. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable, yet there was an air of heaviness about it. The washroom was located at the end of a narrow hallway, tucked away from the other rooms of the house. I had already started to feel a strange unease whenever I passed that hallway, as though someone or something was waiting just out of sight. One night, after a long day of settling in, I decided to take a bath. It had been a while since I had truly relaxed, and I thought the warm water would soothe the stress that had begun to build in my body. I locked the door behind me, lit a candle, and turned on the tap. The water was slow to warm, and the house seemed unnaturally still. As I sank into the tub, the warmth began to melt away my tension. The flickering candlelight cast strange shadows on the walls, and the sound of water gently splashing was the only thing I could hear. But soon, the silence grew louder, and I began to feel a strange sensation, as if the room itself was holding its breath. I glanced toward the small, circular mirror above the sink. It was fogged up from the steam, but something about it felt wrong. It was as though the mist was moving, shifting unnaturally. I turned my gaze back to the water, trying to ignore the feeling creeping up my spine. But then, something happened. I saw a shadow flicker across the mirror, something that wasn't mine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, but the washroom was empty. No one was there. I quickly dismissed it as a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. But as I closed my eyes and tried to relax again, I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. It came from somewhere near the door, but when I turned to look, the room was empty. I thought it was just the house settling, or perhaps the wind rattling the window. But the whisper came again, this time clearer. "Don't forget." The voice was faint, but unmistakable. It was cold, like the breath of someone standing just behind me. My body tensed, and my heart raced. I got out of the tub, dripping wet, and ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. The handle turned, but the door remained stubbornly locked from the inside. Panic surged through me. I was trapped. My breath came faster, my chest tightening. The whispering continued, now louder, almost frantic. It was as though the very walls were whispering, the sound echoing through my skull. "Don't forget. Don't forget." I could feel the air growing colder, the temperature dropping. The steam from the bath had long dissipated, and yet a chill ran down my spine. My hands shook as I yanked at the door again, but it wouldn't budge. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something in the mirror. At first, It was just a blur. But as I stared, it became clearer: a face. A pale, distorted face that seemed to be pressed up against the mirror from the other side. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even human. The eyes were dark, hollow, and the skin stretched tight, as though the face was pressed against the glass. I screamed, and finally, the door flew open. I bolted out of the washroom, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran down the hallway, almost tripping over my own feet. But when I reached the living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. The house was eerily quiet again. The whispers were gone, and the chill had faded. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. That something was still in the house, watching me, waiting for me to go back. But I didn't. I couldn't. I locked the door to the washroom, and I never went back inside. The next day, I decided to investigate. I went to the local library and asked about the house. It didn't take long for the librarian to give me a strange look before answering. "You know," she said, "that house has been there a long time. It was once owned by a family who had to leave after strange things started happening. They said they'd heard voices coming from the washroom. Some people say it's haunted by the spirit of a woman who died there, but no one knows for sure." She didn't say anything else, but I didn't need to hear more. I had already begun to suspect that whatever was in that house wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real. I haven't been back to the house since that night. I moved out, leaving the keys behind. The washroom remains locked, and I refuse to go near it. The feeling of being watched hasn't gone away, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear the whispers, just faint enough to make my heart race. Don't forget, but I don't want to know what it's trying to tell me. Some things are better left forgotten. The end. Story 2. When I moved into the old house, I wasn't aware of the darkness that lingered in its corners, waiting to come alive. The house itself was beautiful, large, with vintage wood floors that creaked as you walked, and tall windows that allowed sunlight to stream in, filling the rooms with warmth. But there was one part of the house that always sent a chill down my spine: the storeroom. Located in the back of the house, near the kitchen, the door to the storeroom was hidden behind a heavy curtain. It wasn't locked, but the door always felt strange, as if it didn't belong. It didn't match the rest of the house. It was old and weathered, with a chipped handle that seemed to have seen better days. I avoided the room at first, not thinking much of it. It was just a storage space. After all, there was nothing unusual about it. Or so I thought. A few weeks after moving in, I was cleaning up around the house when I noticed the door to the storeroom was slightly ajar. I had never left it open, and no one else in the house had been near it. Curiosity got the best of me, so I decided to take a peek inside. As soon as I stepped into the storeroom, I felt a sharp drop in temperature. It wasn't just the cold air from the room, it felt like the temperature of the entire house had shifted, as though I had stepped into a different world. The room was filled with boxes, old furniture, and forgotten items. But there was something about the atmosphere that felt off. It was as though the room itself was holding onto something that didn't want to be found. I pushed a few boxes aside and went deeper into the room, my flashlight flickering in the dim light. The room was too quiet, the air too still. It was unsettling. And then I saw at the corner of an old mirror. It was large, framed in dark wood, its surface cracked, as though it had been neglected for years. The mirror wasn't like any other mirror I had seen. It was tarnished, covered in dust, and the reflection it cast was wrong. I could see myself standing there, but there was something in the mirror that shouldn't have been. Behind me, just out of sight, stood a shadow of figure, barely visible, but unmistakably there. My heart began to race as I stared at the reflection frozen in place. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing behind me. Just the empty room. My breath was shaky as I backed away from the mirror. I was about to leave when I heard a soft whisper, barely audible, coming from the far corner of the room. I spun around again, expecting to find someone or something, but the room remained empty. The whispering continued, soft and rhythmic, as if it were coming from the walls themselves. The cold intensified, and a feeling of dread washed over me, like I wasn't alone anymore. I hurriedly exited the room, slamming the door shut behind me. The temperature seemed to return to normal, but the feeling of unease lingered. I couldn't shake the sense that the storeroom held something dark, something that was trying to reach out. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the whispering, still feel the presence of the shadow. I never went back into the storeroom. I couldn't. Every time I passed by, the door would creak open slightly, as if inviting me in. But I refused. There was something about that room that I couldn't explain, something I didn't want to understand. It was as though the room was alive, holding on to memories, to secrets, to things that were better left forgotten. To this day, I can still feel it. The chill that filled the storeroom, the whispering that seemed to echo in my ears, and the shadow that still lurks in the corner of my mind. I left the house shortly after, and I never looked back. Some places are better left unexplored. Some rooms are better left locked. The end. Story 3. It was a crisp autumn evening when I first laid eyes on the house. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the old, weathered property. I had heard the rumors, of course, the whispers about the house at the end of the street. Some people said it was cursed. Others claimed it was haunted by things not meant to be understood. But none of that stopped me. After all, I was looking for a new place to call home, and this old Victorian house seemed like the perfect fit for me. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The realtor, an older woman named Mrs. Thompson, was quick to show me the house. It's been empty for years, she explained, but it's a solid structure, great bones, just needs a little love. Her smile was warm, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. That should have been my first clue, but I was too eager to care. As we stepped into the house, the air felt different. It was heavy, thick with something unspoken. The wooden floors creaked beneath my feet, and the smell of dust and old wood filled the air. The house was massive, with tall ceilings and intricate woodwork that seemed to tell a story all its own. Yet, something about it didn't sit right. The walls were adorned with strange portraits, all faded and unsettling, their eyes watching me no matter where I stood. I shook it off, convincing myself that it was just an old house. Mrs. Thompson showed me around, detailing the various rooms, the parlor, the kitchen, the bedrooms upstairs. But as she led me through the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I could hear faint noises, creaks in the floorboards and whispers in the walls. When I asked Mrs. Thompson about it, she merely smiled and said, "Old houses have a way of settling. It's nothing to worry about." When we reached the basement, I hesitated. The door was made of heavy wood, the paint chipped and worn. Mrs. Thompson opened it with ease, but I could feel a cold draft coming from below. "The cellar is a little musty," she said. "Nothing a bit of cleaning won't fix." I nodded but didn't move to go down. Instead, I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, listening. For a moment, I could have sworn I heard soft, muffled footsteps coming from below. I finally decided to rent the house. Despite the odd feeling in my stomach, I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was being silly. After all, how could a house this beautiful be anything other than perfect? That first night, I settled into the master bedroom. The furniture was old but sturdy, the bed was large, and the sheets were soft. But sleep didn't come easily. The house was quiet to quiet. I could hear the wind howling outside, but inside, there was an oppressive silence that weighed on me. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I began to hear the soft, steady creaking of the floorboards. It wasn't the house settling. It was something else. I tried to ignore it, but then I heard a whisper, barely audible at first, but growing louder, clearer. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was soft but insistent. "Get out." I shot up in bed, looking around the room, but there was no one there. I tried to convince myself it was the wind or the house creaking, but something told me it wasn't. I turned on the bedside lamp, my hands trembling. Nothing. The room was empty. I lay back down, trying to calm myself. The whispering faded, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing, waiting. The next few days were no better. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was wrong. Every time I walked through the halls, I felt eyes on me, and I started hearing those whispers more and more. "Get out." At night, the creaking of the floorboards became louder, more deliberate. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find the doors to my room cracked open, even though I had closed them tightly before bed. It was as if someone or something was moving through the house when I wasn't looking. One evening, I decided to explore the house further. I went into the attic, which was even dustier than the rest of the house. There were old boxes stacked high, filled with forgotten things. As I moved a box to the side, I found a small, old journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, the leather cover cracked and worn. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was a name, Emily Fairfax. As I flipped through the pages, I learned about Emily's life in the house. She had lived there with her family in the late 1800s. But the entries grew darker as time went on. The last few pages were filled with frantic scribblings, as if she had been driven mad by something in the house. "They're watching me." One entry read, "I hear them in the walls, whispering my name. They won't let me leave." The last entry sent a chill down my spine. "I can feel them. They won't let me leave this house. They want me to stay forever." I slammed the journal shut, my hands shaking. The room felt colder all of a sudden, and the whispers returned, louder than before. "Leave. Leave now." That night, I packed my things. I couldn't